But the tumbling markets may have less to do with the US presidency and rather more to do with the economic woes in Europe that have largely overshadowed Barack Obama's first term. Tonight in Greece, there have been violent clashes between the police and protesters who've gathered in Athens to demonstrate against still more austerity. And this evening, Angela Merkel is on her way to meet David Cameron in Downing Street. Earlier, the German Chancellor made an impassioned plea for Britain not to leave the European Union. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has this.
Chancellor Merkel arrived at number 10 in the last few minutes after an extraordinary direct plea to the United Kingdom not to quit the European Union. She made the call answering questions at the European Parliament, where she talked about the dangers for Britain of being outside the EU and how she passionately wanted Britain to stay in.
I want to have a strong UK in the European Union. To make that absolutely clear, I come from Germany. The UK was with us when we were liberated from National Socialism. I can't imagine, we had British soldiers still in Germany. I can't imagine that the UK wouldn't be part of Europe.
Well, that was a pretty extraordinary curtain raiser from Chancellor Merkel to tonight's talks here in Downing Street, because exit isn't on the agenda, and David Cameron says he doesn't want Britain to come out. But David Cameron's expected to say in a speech soon that he wants a big repatriation of powers from Europe to be followed by a referendum. And many people in Europe think that's a recipe for British exit.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chancellor Merkel.
Chancellor Merkel's words at the European Parliament were provoked by a speech from the UKIP leader, Nigel Farage.
All I'm suggesting, Chancellor, is that we have a simple, amicable divorce, and then we'll all get on much better in the future.
If you have a world of 7 billion, and if you're alone in that world, I don't think that's good for the UK. And so I'll do everything to keep the UK in the European Union as a good partner. And so that's why I'm going to London this evening. And I will ask the inhabitants of this wonderful island that you can be very happy, but you won't be happy if you're alone in this world.
Whitehall sources say there's a live debate amongst officials and political leaders in Berlin about whether Europe would be better off without Britain. And the German Chancellor is trying to show she isn't one of those who wants Britain out.
Tonight's discussions are actually mainly about the EU budget negotiations that happen in Brussels later this month. At the moment, David Cameron's going to those with very little wriggle room. He doesn't think other EU countries would sign up to the cut he'd like in the budget. He says he'll veto any real terms increase. So it looks like the only thing that he would sign up to is one thing: a real terms freeze. Chancellor Merkel wouldn't personally have much difficulty in signing up to that herself, but she wants a deal across Europe, and she knows other countries won't go along with that freeze. So tonight's discussions look like being extremely difficult.
In the European Parliament, Chancellor Merkel heard speaker after speaker call for an increase in the EU budget, MEPs saying it was needed to keep some European countries going. As they spoke in central Athens, police fired tear gas and water cannon at thousands of protesters who were trying to stop a vote in Parliament, expected to approve another round of austerity measures.
Well, now our economics editor Faisal Islam joins us live from central London. You know, Faisal, normally after a presidential election you can look to the markets and see, do they like the guy or not? They're glad that Obama's going on. Not today, because those problems over there in Europe completely overshadow what's happening here.
Quite, as if on cue, one geopolitical situation sorted out in Washington, another one flaring up, popping back up to say hello here in Europe. There is a connection with the US presidential election, though it's not President Obama's fault. It was quite clear that European authorities put on hold some of the tough decisions around the Eurozone to let the US presidential elections have a kind of free run. They didn't want a nasty surprise, as you had 4 years ago with the Lehman Brothers collapse. No Greek exit in the middle of the US election campaign. As a result, hostilities have resumed within hours of President Obama's re-election. You saw the pictures from Greece. More substantively, there's a crucial vote there tonight, another vote at the weekend, that will determine whether or not Greece accepts conditions new conditions on its economy in return for a €30 billion bailout package. And it does seem as if that vote's going to pass, but be very close, leading Greek parties in the coalition government abstaining or even voting against it. On top of that, Eurozone, a new forecast for the European economy showing things going back into stagnation or even recession. Very worrying.
Well, of course, this end of the Atlantic, we've got the fiscal cliff. That's a huge challenge. Do you see that being resolved?
It is a massive challenge. In Washington, the suggestion, the narrative has been, if you like, that it's more of a slope than a cliff. What it is, a £600 billion fiscal adjustment, 4% of America's GDP in tax rises and spending cuts that will kick in an economy growing only by 2%. That means recession if they step over the precipice of this cliff on January the 1st. And the constellation of election results that we got last night are consistent with continued deadlock. Someone's going to have to give way, someone's going to have to compromise. If they don't, then you're talking American economy going into recession, Eurozone in trouble, powerhouses of the new economies like Brazil, China, India slowing down already. It's not a great series of clouds for the new president or indeed for us here in Britain.